Which tracks your sleep and activity better, the Apple Watch or the Oura Ring? I wore both of them for a week straight and compared every single night in a spreadsheet. So by the end of this video, you can decide which one to get or if you should even bother with either of them. For the purpose of the sleep test, I wore the Oura Ring Gen 4 on my left index finger and the Apple Watch SE3 on my left wrist. So they're both on the same side for each of the 7 nights. I had the Apple Watch sync its data to the health app on my phone, and then the Oura Ring sync the data to the Oura Ring app on my phone. That way I could keep both of the data sets separate from each other. And the metrics that I tested were sleep score, total time asleep, time awake, REM sleep, light sleep, aka core sleep on the Apple Watch, and then finally deep sleep. So here's my spreadsheet I used to track all the data. I took it all from the health app and the Oura Ring app. Each morning I'd go and put this in. So as you can see here, I logged it for 7 nights. This is the Apple Watch page as you see at the bottom. Score, time of sleep, awake, REM, light/core, deep. So these are all the stats for the Apple Watch, and then I have all the Oura Ring ones here for each night. And then I made a chart for each section going over them individually. So the blue is the Apple Watch and the red is the Oura Ring. So sleep score, they're decently close, but from what I saw, the Apple Watch tend to kind of overestimate it, or at least higher than the Oura Ring in that regard. As you can see for all these here, the Oura Ring was slightly lower. And then in terms of time of sleep, they're both pretty eye and eye, and this is probably the easiest metric for the device to track because it's just like pretty much when my body stops moving and then when I start moving a bunch again once I wake up. So that I didn't really expect there to be too much of an error between the two. So they're pretty much following along each other. And then for the awake time, this kind of surprised me here. So the Apple Watch underestimated the time I was awake, whereas the Oura Ring overestimated. And I'm just saying over and underestimate. I don't have a third thing to compare it to. I'm just saying at least in terms of each other. So that's what I noticed here. And then for the REM sleep, again, these were kind of all over the place, somewhat aligned, but the Apple Watch more ups and downs, whereas the Oura Ring was somewhat the same relatively. And then the light sleep, this is where I noticed a big difference as well. The Apple Watch was showing a lot more light sleep. The Oura Ring was showing a lot less. And then it was the inverse with the deep sleep. So you can see here the Apple Watch, there wasn't much deep sleep going on, whereas the Oura Ring was showing a lot more. So like this night, for example, 1.6 hours of deep sleep on the Apple Watch, and then almost a little over 2.25 for the Oura Ring. And the biggest discrepancy was probably here, my last night, which was yesterday. Almost 2 hours on the Oura Ring and half an hour on the Apple Watch. So I don't really know how accurate these things are, but that is just the data that is shown here. But long story short, I don't think you need either of these unless you're some type of metric freak and you really care about having those sleep scores and all that data to analyze each day. I was more so curious just to see what my sleep score is like because I'd never done any sort of sleep tracking like that. But I already know my sleep's pretty good because I focus on the inputs, good sleep habits, optimizing my environment, and nighttime routine, even my morning routine will help with the sleep as well. So focusing on dialing in those inputs and then the outputs should follow, in this case being high quality sleep. And these devices are only, they say 60 to 65% accurate compared to something called a PSG. I don't know the acronym, it's polysomnography something test, which is basically like a sleep test in the lab where they hook up the electrodes and measure your brain waves and all that sort of stuff. Call me cheap, but it seems kind of stupid to spend a couple $100s on either of these devices just to roughly tell you how you slept, when I can just wake up and I'll know with my mind and my body how I slept. I'll feel it right when I wake up and I'll feel it throughout the day. If I have an afternoon crash or if I'm struggling to focus working or my performance at the gym training is shit, then I know I slept bad. But if I have the opposite of that, I know I slept good. And not to mention for the Oura Ring, you have to pay a monthly subscription on top of the device cost just to see the metrics that it tracks, which is the stupidest thing ever. Then for the step tracking test, after my first day of testing, I realized I wasn't gonna include the Oura Ring in it. One, because it wasn't that accurate to begin with. I first tested with my morning walk and it was, I think like 2,000 steps short of like a 6K walk compared to my phone and Apple Watch. So I scrapped that. But then also throughout the day, it was just in the way too much. You know, when I was washing my hands, having to take it off, I mean, you could leave it on, but I didn't wanna get a bunch of shit on it. Training at the gym is completely in the way, you know, gripping onto a machine, dumbbell, whatever. Otherwise you'd scratch it up a bunch, etc. So I figured I would just kind of exclude it, put it in my pocket. But even then, I wanted to see if it tracked my steps, you know, for the brief moments I put in my pocket or something. It didn't seem to, so I just scrapped it from the step track test completely. So with that in mind, I tracked my steps on the Apple Watch and my iPhone and only compared those two. And keep in mind, the steps is the only metric that I was looking at here. I wasn't looking at calories burned or run time and like pace, stuff like that, because I don't do any sort of runs like that. And that's gotta be one of the stupidest forms of cardio. You literally just need to walk. So just as an example for the accuracy of the Apple Watch versus the phone, I did a test this morning actually on my morning walk. So I took a picture of the watch beforehand because I wore it overnight and, you know, went to the bathroom and stuff. So I had a bit of steps on it already. I started with 792. I took a screenshot of my phone in the health app. They're both on airplane mode, so they weren't synced. 0 steps on the phone. And then I put it in my pocket in the Apple Watch and I started from that point on. When I got back, 61:41 on the watch, and on my phone, 5:52:21. But then I had to subtract obviously the steps I had on the watch to begin with, so I did the math there. So then I got 53:49, so not too far off from the phone. So the difference between those two, 128 steps. And let's say you times that by 2 if you're getting about 10K steps a day, you're looking about a difference of 250 steps, which over the course of a day isn't that bad at all. And if anything, the phone's actually underestimating, so you're getting more steps in, which would only be benefit to you. But yeah, the Apple Watch and the iPhone were actually very close in terms of the step count. And from the research I've done, at least, the Apple Watch can actually be less accurate because it takes into account the movement of your wrist, right? So if you're pushing a cart or you have something in your arm you're carrying, like it might not account for those steps. Whereas the phone you can have in your pocket or in your hand and it does a much better job and still continues to track all those steps. And for all my tests, by the way, I forgot to mention, you know, for the Oura Ring, the Apple Watch, my iPhone, they're all in airplane mode, so I wasn't blasting myself with EMFs the entire time, and then I just turn Bluetooth on once a day just to sync the data and stuff. Okay, and in terms of comfort and battery life, the Oura Ring was very comfortable to wear while I was sleeping, but like I said before, wearing it during the day, it just got in the way too much. And then for the battery life on the Oura Ring, they say on their website it can last around 5 to 8 days, but if you use it the way that I did, you know, pretty much always on airplane mode, only wearing it for sleep tracking at night, so it's not really getting your activity during the day, you could probably push that to 9-10 days. I didn't do a specific test myself, but I would imagine it would go longer. And for the Apple Watch, it was pretty comfortable and fine during the day. The only time I noticed it was kind of an issue is like if I was wearing like long sleeves or a sweater, jacket, something like that, you know, I might have to pull the sleeve over it a little bit. Or if I was training at the gym and I had wrist straps on or doing exercise with cables, you know, like a cable fly, the strap there would kind of like get in the way and rub a bit there, but not a big deal. And I actually did do a proper battery test with the Apple Watch with airplane mode on, and I went through and turned off a bunch of unnecessary settings that would just drain the battery I wasn't using. But long story short, for that, I was actually able to push it to just under 48 hours, which Apple says on their website it's 18 hours battery life, but I'm sure that takes into account, you know, having it hooked up to your phone over Bluetooth, you know, calls, messages, doing a bunch of bullshit on there, which I wasn't doing. So just under 48 hours, that's pretty solid. That being said, I am a minimalist, so I'm not a fan of having more things on my fingers or on my wrists, you know, just more things having to carry around and charge as well. The final verdict, if you just really want sleep tracking and you don't mind paying a monthly subscription on top of the device cost, I would get the Oura Ring. But if you want something for steps specifically without having to carry your phone around all day, I'd go with the Apple Watch. If you want to focus on sleep tracking and steps together, I would get the Apple Watch because you don't have to pay some bullshit subscription and it does a decent job and it's kind of an all-in-one. But my honest opinion, don't waste your money on either of them. Just track your steps with your phone, fix your sleep habits, and focus on the inputs. High quality sleep will just be a byproduct of that. I'm gonna make another video specifically talking about sleep habits and how to optimize your routine so you can get the best sleep possible and you don't need fancy devices like these. But yeah, that's pretty much the end of the video. If you've made it this far, good on you. You're watching something about getting better sleep and improving yourself when you could be doom scrolling and watching some brain rot. Like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. If you want access to the spreadsheet that has all the data I use to compare all the nights of sleep, I'll leave a link to that in the description. And if you want to optimize your sleep, your lifestyle, and your physique, book a call with me for my one-on-one coaching and we'll see if you're a good fit.